The call came on a Tuesday morning, and I almost didn't answer it. I was standing in the parking lot of the grocery store, bags in both hands, keys in my teeth, the way you do when you've miscalculated how much you could carry in one trip. I saw the number my neighbor from back home, a woman named Ruth who had lived 3 houses down from my childhood home for as long as I could remember, and I almost let it go to voicemail. We weren't close. She sent a card when my father passed. I sent one back. That was the extent of it. But something made me set the bags down on the hood of my car and answer. "I don't want to be in anyone's business," she said, and I could hear the hesitation in her voice, the way she was choosing each word carefully. "But there's a moving truck in front of your father's house. And the people unloading it, I think it's your brother, him and his wife, and they've been at it since 7 this morning." I stood there in the parking lot for a moment and didn't say anything. "Are you there, honey?" Ruth asked. "I'm here," I said. "Thank you for calling me." I left the grocery bags on the hood. I didn't even remember driving home to get my things. I just remember being on the highway 40 minutes later. The sky a flat gray November color. My hands very steady on the wheel in a way that felt wrong. The way things go quiet right before something breaks. My father had died 6 weeks earlier. He had a heart attack in his kitchen on a Wednesday afternoon, and by the time the ambulance arrived, there was nothing they could do. He was 68 years old and stubborn and proud, and he had built that house with his own hands on a piece of land he'd bought at 32, and I had grown up running through every room of it, and when he died, he left it to me. I knew that because I had been there when he signed his will. 3 years before he died, when he was recovering from a minor health scare that turned out to be nothing serious, he'd called me on the phone and said he wanted to get his affairs in order. I drove the 4 hours from where I lived, and I sat in the office of an estate attorney named Mr. Halpern, and I watched my father sign his name to the document that said the house and the land it sat on would pass to me when he was gone. He'd left my brother and his wife a sum of money. He was clear about it, and he was calm about it. And afterward, we went to dinner at the diner he'd loved his whole life, and he ordered the chicken fried steak, and he seemed at peace. My brother had not been at that appointment. My brother had not been at many things over the years. Not at my father's knee surgery. Not at the weekends when Dad's roof needed patching, and I was the one who drove 4 hours each way to help. Not at the quiet months when our father got older and needed someone to check in. My brother called on holidays and birthdays. He was good at holidays and birthdays. I knew all of this as I drove. I wasn't letting myself think past the facts yet, because the facts were strange enough. A moving truck. 7 in the morning. My brother and his wife. The house came into view around a bend in the county road, and I saw the truck immediately white, long, parked halfway in the grass because my brother had never been good at judging distances. The front door was open. There were boxes on the porch. I parked behind the truck and sat for one moment with my hands in my lap. Then I got out. My brother's wife came around the side of the house carrying a cardboard box and stopped when she saw me. She had a look on her face that I had seen on her before, not quite guilty, not quite defiant, something in between, the expression of someone who has rehearsed a version of this conversation and is now sorting through which version to use. "We've been trying to reach you," she said. "My phone has been on," I said, "all day, every day." She set the box down on the porch steps. "There's been a development," she said, "with the estate. You should talk to your brother." I walked past her into the house. My brother was in the living room. He had my father's armchair pushed to one side and he was measuring the wall with a tape measure. And when I came through the door, he turned around and looked at me with an expression I can only describe as prepared. Like he'd expected this, like he'd been ready. "I'm glad you're here," he said. "Actually, it saves us a step." "What are you doing in this house?" I said. He let the tape measure retract. He set it on the windowsill. He sat down in my father's armchair, which he had moved 3 feet from where it had sat for 20 years, and he folded his hands in his lap. "There was a second will," he said. I looked at him. "Dad made changes," he said, "after the one you know about. He had a new will drafted 8 months ago. It supersedes the earlier document. The house comes to me and my wife. I know this is hard to hear." He said those last words in a particular tone, gentle and practiced, the way you'd speak to someone who was being unreasonable, and you wanted the room to notice how patient you were being. "Who drafted it?" I said. "An attorney," he said. "I have a copy. My wife can get it for you." "I want to see it," I said. He nodded at his wife, who had come in behind me, and she went to the kitchen and came back with a manila envelope. Inside was a document, several pages, with my father's name at the top and a signature at the bottom of the last page. There was a notary stamp. There was an attorney's name printed beneath the signature line. I looked at my father's signature for a long time. I had watched my father sign his name thousands of times over the course of my life. Checks, birthday cards, permission slips, the deed to this house. The The will in Mr. Halpern's office. I knew the way he made his capital letters, the particular slant of his handwriting that had gotten slightly more cramped as he got older. The signature on this document was close. It was very close, but the capital in his first name curved the wrong way. It was a small thing. The kind of thing you'd only notice if you'd been looking at someone's handwriting your whole life. I'm going to need to verify this, I said. Of course, my brother said. That's your right. He was very calm. That calmness bothered me more than anything else. I took photos of every page of the document before I handed it back. I photographed the notary stamp. I photographed the attorney's name. Then I went back to my car, and I sat in the driveway of the house my father built, and I called Mr. Halpern's office. His assistant answered and told me he was with a client, and I said very carefully that it was urgent and that it related to the estate of a client who had passed away recently. And 30 seconds later, Mr. Halpern was on the phone. I told him what I was holding. I told him the attorney's name on the document. There was a silence on his end. Not the silence of someone thinking, the silence of someone being careful. I know that attorney, Mr. Halpern said slowly. He retired 4 years ago. He no longer holds an active license. The air in my car felt different after that. Stiller. And the will you have on file, I said. The one my father signed in your office. Is that the most recent document you have? It is, he said. Your father never contacted me about amendments of any kind. In 30 years of practice, he was one of my most consistent clients. I find it extremely unlikely he would have engaged another attorney without informing me. He paused. Would you like me to meet you at the county courthouse? I said yes. I said I would be there in 20 minutes. I got out of my car. My brother was standing on the porch now, watching me with his arms crossed. And his wife was beside him, and they looked like they had already won something. I'm going to verify the document, I told him. Don't move anything else while I'm gone. You can verify whatever you want, he said. It's not going to change what the paper says. I drove to the county courthouse and I kept both hands on the wheel the whole way. Mr. Halpern was already there when I arrived. A trim, gray-haired man in a dark coat who shook my hand with both of his and looked at me with an expression that was equal parts professional concern and something that I think was anger, though he kept it very controlled. He had printed a copy of my father's original will and brought it in a folder. We went inside together. The clerk at the probate window was a woman who looked like she had been working there for a long time and had seen most things. Mr. Halpern asked her to pull the filing record for my father's estate. She typed the case number, looked at the screen, and then she typed something else. Then she stopped. She looked at us. When was this submitted? She said. And she wasn't asking us. She was reading from her screen. This was submitted 3 weeks ago. What was submitted? Mr. Halpern asked. A will, she said. Filed for probate. She read the attorney's name from her screen. Then she looked at Mr. Halpern. That attorney's license has been inactive since 4 years ago, Mr. Halpern said. The clerk looked at him. She looked at me. She turned back to her screen and typed something else and went very still the way people do when something they're looking at doesn't add up and they're running the numbers again to make sure. Then she picked up her desk phone, murmured something into it, and set it back down. I'm going to need to bring my supervisor over, she said. Please don't go anywhere. The supervisor was a man in his 50s who came out from the back with his reading glasses pushed up on his head and bent over the clerk's computer and read for a long time without saying anything. Then he straightened and looked at Mr. Halpern with the particular expression of someone who works in a bureaucracy and has just realized a serious breach has occurred on their watch. This document appears to have been submitted in person, the supervisor said. 3 weeks ago. Afternoon filing, late in the day. He looked at the clerk. Who was on window at 4:30 on the 14th? I'd have to check the log, the clerk said. Check it. While they were checking, Mr. Halpern turned to me and said quietly, a fraudulent will submitted to probate is a felony in this state. Document fraud, fraud upon the court. If this is what it appears to be, the people who filed this are in serious trouble. He paused. Do you want to call the police, or would you like me to? I thought about my brother sitting in my father's armchair. I thought about the moving truck in the yard. I thought about how calm he'd been. I'll call, I said. I stepped into the hallway and called the non-emergency line for the county sheriff's office and explained the situation as clearly and quickly as I could. The dispatcher asked me several questions, and I answered all of them. She told me a deputy would meet me at the property. When I went back in, the supervisor was on his own phone. The clerk had found the log. The document had been submitted by a woman who had given her name as the executor of the estate. When the clerk, a different clerk, the one on duty that afternoon, had asked for identification, the woman had provided a driver's license. The supervisor was now explaining to someone on the phone that they may have accepted a fraudulent filing and that they needed guidance on how to proceed. Mr. Halpern put his copy of the legitimate will back in its folder and tucked it under his arm. "Shall we?" he said. We drove back in separate cars. On the way, my hands were doing that steady thing again, and I recognized it now for what it was. Not calm, but something that comes before calm, the way a room gets quiet before the window breaks. The deputy was already there when I pulled up. His car was parked on the road, and he was standing near the mailbox in a way that managed to be simultaneously low-key and very present. My brother and his wife were on the porch. The moving truck was still in the yard, but no one appeared to have been doing any more carrying. Mr. Halpern parked behind me and got out with his folder. The deputy met us at the end of the driveway, and I explained the situation to him while Mr. Halpern provided the documentation, the original will, the attorney letterhead, his own credentials. The deputy looked at everything without rushing. He was the kind of person who doesn't perform authority. He just has it. "And the document they have?" the deputy asked. "Filed by my brother," I said, "under a license that's been inactive for 4 years. The courthouse is flagging it now." The deputy nodded once, slowly. Then he looked toward the porch where my brother and his wife were watching us, and he walked up the front path. My brother came down the porch steps. He had his arms crossed again, and he had on the expression he used when he thought he was going to be able to talk his way through something, a kind of affable authority, like he was the most reasonable person in any room, and it was only a matter of time before everyone else realized it. "Officer," he said, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Deputy," the officer said, "and I'd like to see the document you filed with the county probate office." My brother's wife went inside and came back with the manila envelope. The deputy read through the document carefully, read the attorney's name, read the notary information, read the signature. He did not change his expression. "The attorney named on this document," he said, "has not held an active license in this state for 4 years. The notary stamp is registered to an individual who filed for retirement of their commission 2 years ago." He looked at my brother. "Can you tell me how you came to have this document?" My brother's expression shifted, just slightly, the prepared look cracking somewhere around the edges. "Our father had it drawn up," he said. "We found it among his papers after he passed." "Found it," the deputy said. "Among his things." The deputy looked at Mr. Halpern. Mr. Halpern opened his folder and handed over the original will notarized, witnessed, dated 3 years prior, signed in a state-licensed attorney's office by a man whose signature I could recognize in my sleep. "The estate attorney on record," Mr. Halpern said, "has a signed and witnessed will placing this property with your client's sister. That will predates the document your office was presented with, and it was executed while the deceased was in good health and of clear mind, in the presence of 2 witnesses, neither of whom is related to any party in this dispute." My brother looked at me for the first time. I had been standing back during all of this, a few feet behind the deputy, and I had not said anything for several minutes. When my brother looked at me, I didn't look away. "She would have let it sit empty," he said. "That's all she was going to do. Let it sit. Dad worked his whole life for this house. It deserves to be lived in." His voice had shifted. The practiced calmness was gone, and what was underneath it was rawer and uglier and, I thought, probably the truest thing he'd said all day. I didn't respond. "You were always the favorite," he said. "Every single thing you did was." "Sir?" the deputy said. My brother stopped. "I need you and your wife to remain here," the deputy said. "I'm going to call this in, and there's going to be an investigation into the document you submitted to the county. You should not move any property from this house, and I would strongly recommend you call an attorney." He paused. "The good kind. With an active license." My brother's wife sat down on the porch steps. She had gone a color that I don't think she'd been planning on being that afternoon. The deputy went back to his car to make his calls, and Mr. Halpern stood beside me on the front walk and didn't say anything for a moment, which I appreciated. "What happens now?" I said. "The county will suspend the fraudulent probate filing," he said. "The original will is on record and has precedence. The property is yours." He paused. "As for the rest of it, submitting a forged document to a probate court is a serious crime. The DA's office will be involved. The fact that the attorney whose name appears on that document has been inactive for 4 years, and the notary's commission was retired, someone created that document, and they filed it. Those are facts that are going to be very difficult to explain away." I looked at the house. The front door was still open. I could see the edge of my father's couch from where I was standing, one corner of a framed photograph on the wall. the beginning of the hallway that led to the kitchen where he had cooked breakfast on Saturday mornings when I was small. "Thank you," I said to Mr. Halpern, "for coming today. Your father was my client for 30 years, he said simply. "This is the last thing I can do for him." The investigation took several weeks. During that time, I was not living in the house, but I was in contact with the DA's office, with Mr. Halpern, with the deputy who had responded that afternoon and who turned out to be thorough in a way that I was deeply grateful for. He had gone back to the courthouse and reviewed the security footage from the afternoon the document was filed. The footage showed my brother's wife at the window. It showed the clerk accepting the filing. It showed everything. The retired attorney, whose name appeared on the document, was located in Florida, where he had been living for 3 years. He stated that he had no knowledge of the document, that he had not prepared it, and that his credentials had been used without his authorization. The notary said the same. Both of them cooperated fully. My brother and his wife were charged with filing a forged instrument, fraud upon the court, and theft by deception. The criminal case moved through the system the way such things do, slowly and then all at once. Their attorney, the one with an actual active license, was very busy for a long time. The courthouse clerk who had accepted the filing was placed on administrative leave while the county reviewed its after-hours submission procedures. 2 policy changes were implemented within the following month. My father's house was formally conveyed to me on a cold morning in January, in Mr. Halpern's office, with paperwork that was genuine and a signature that was mine. Afterward, I drove to the property and sat in the driveway for a while, looking at the house he had built, and I thought about the fact that he had made his wishes known and had trusted that they would be honored, and that in the end, they were. I walked through every room. The movers had brought some things in and then stopped when the deputy arrived, so there were a few boxes in the living room that didn't belong to me, and those were collected later. Everything else was exactly where my father had left it. The photograph on the hallway wall. The armchair, returned to its proper position by the window. The kitchen, which still smelled faintly like the coffee he'd made every morning of his adult life. I stood in the kitchen for a long time. Then I called the moving company I'd hired and told them I was ready. People ask me sometimes what the hardest part was. They assume it was the confrontation at the house, or the waiting during the investigation, or the court appearances, of which there were several. But the hardest part was the day Ruth called me in the grocery store parking lot, standing there with bags in my hands and my keys in my teeth, in the half-second before I answered the phone. Because in that half-second, I still lived in a world where my brother was just someone I'd grown apart from, someone who missed holidays and let calls go unanswered, someone ordinary in his failures. After I answered the phone, that world was gone, and I've never been able to fully account for the distance between those 2 moments, how you can be standing in the same parking lot, the same gray sky, the same grocery bags cutting into your palms, and have everything be completely different. What I can account for is this: my father knew what he wanted. He sat in an attorney's office, and he said it out loud, and he signed his name, the real version of his name, with the capital that curved the right way, and those words and that signature outlasted everything my brother tried to put in their place. That house is mine now. I moved in on a Saturday, which is the day my father always said was the right day to start something new. I put his armchair back by the window, exactly where he always kept it, angled slightly toward the yard so you can see the maple tree in the corner of the property that he planted the year I was born. I sat in it the first evening and watched the light change across the floor. And I thought about the fact that the things people build with their hands, with their time, with 30 years of Saturday breakfasts and weekend projects and a life lived carefully, those things have weight. They have record. They don't disappear just because someone with a printer and a forged stamp wants them to. Justice isn't always fast. But it keeps records too. My brother is awaiting sentencing. His wife took a plea. The house is mine. And the maple tree, the one my father planted the year I was born, is still standing in the corner of the yard, taller than he ever saw it get.